UFC Fight Night Vegas 95 takes place on August 10th, this Saturday. Tybura vs. Spivak 2. What a card, ladies and gentlemen. The co-main event, Gutierrez vs. Basharat, isn't even happening. I'll let you look at the card for yourselves. Jason Jackson, Chepe Mariscal. Yana Santos vs. Chelsea Chandler. Danny Barlow. Legit prospect. I'm excited to see that fight. And Nascimento vs. Filho. Legit fight. Also off the card. I mean, what are we looking at here? Tybura Spivak. What a matchup. Two, I hate to even call them well-rounded, crafty guys, but they're both just middle of the pack, wrestling heavy, grappler types that can strike a little bit. They're slightly more athletic than your average heavyweight, but there's not much to write home about either one of them. I think Spivak's going to take the win here. He's better than Tybura in the grappling. He's more dominant and heavy in the ground game. And he's got and proven to have a little bit more pop in his hands. Gutierrez, his replacement, is some guy off the regional scene making his debut. Jason Jackson, Chepe Mariscal, that might be a decent scrap with Chepe finally moving down to featherweight. Kind of a fat lightweight, finally moving down. That'll be a scrap. I'm excited to see that one. Danny Barlow is taking on Veretnikov. I think Danny Barlow really has what it takes to make some moves in the welterweight division. He's fast, he's athletic, and he hits like a freaking truck. And I'm excited to see what he can do here. Not a high spot on the card. If I was the UFC, I might move him into the co-main event spot just to give him some more TV time, to get him that interview, to kind of try to promote him. That guy's legit as they come in terms of prospects. The prelims, man, not much to write home about. Kazuma versus Gregorio might be a decent matchup, but nothing to write home about, truthfully speaking. The women's fights, I'm not all that excited for. This is one of those cards that doesn't have the name value and doesn't really have even the hardcore appeal either, but just because of what it is, it might end up being a fantastic card somehow, some way. Turn into some real good scraps, some good knockouts. It's not one that you're going to want to see, but it's one that you don't want to miss if you're a fight fan. Because these stupid, terrible cards always seem to work out for the UFC. They make them. They plan for them to be terrible on paper, but then somehow they just make them go, man. This is what we get? Really? Like, this is a card? And that leads me to talk about this. I never hear any of the MMA media talk about this, but these cards I'm perfectly okay with if they're doing them for the right reason. If you stack the pay-per-views around these cards, I have no problem with the cards being this terrible. I believe that the UFC pay-per-views should be all-out stacked events. Remember UFC 299? Let me pull it up for you. That kind of card is what we are looking for as fans. Hardcore's delight, casual fans can get interested in it. This is what you want to see for a pay-per-view. Let's start from the bottom. Joanne Wood versus Marina Rose. Excuse me. Can't talk. Joanne Wood had a retirement fight. Did I love the fight? Not really. But it was her retirement fight. Good for her. She got the win. Asu Almabayev versus CJ Vergara. Both legitimate guys in the flyweight division. On the come up. Excuse me. Rebellis Despange versus Josh Parisian. We thought at the time that this guy had something. Despange. He's got fast twitch kickboxing ability. Comes from Taekwondo. Knocked out Josh Parisian in freaking 18 seconds. Great fight for the early prelims of a pay-per-view. Michel Pereira ran through Mikel Oleksiejczuk. He was just the co-main event at the Abu Dhabi card. This pay-per-view was stacked. Ion Cutelaba versus Felipe Lins. Good, solid fight in the light heavyweight division. Prelims of a pay-per-view. This is what I want to see. Pedro Munoz versus Kyler Phillips. Pedro Munoz, good, solid veteran, perennial top 15 contender versus Kyler Phillips, the guy on the come-up. It was a good fight. Was it fantastic? Was it a little slow at times? Yes, but Kyler Phillips always comes up, shows up for the fight. Mateus Gamrot versus Rafael dos Anjos. Not a super exciting fight, but a legitimate top 15 matchup at lightweight. This deserves to be on the prelims. Mateus Gamrot is a legit talent. Is he super exciting? No, so put him on the prelims. That's perfectly okay. These prelims should be a showcase for the people trying to get into that pay-per-view market. Macy Barber versus Caitlin Chukagian. Macy Barber, the young up-and-comer, taking out the veteran. That's what we want to see on the prelims. Is she a super exciting fighter who's always putting it on? No, but she's a contender on her come-up, and we want to see that on the prelims. The main card should be as stacked as possible with all important matchups. Jailton Almeida, Curtis Blades, that was that top 10, top 5 kind of spot. Who's going to break into the heavyweight division? It turns out Curtis Blades was able to get into the heavyweight championship mix after putting on a dominant performance over Jailton. But Jailton showed out in the first round and was able to take Curtis down. That's a legit prelim fight. You could argue that deserved to be on a main card of most other pay-per-views. Peter Yan and Song Yadong, a top 10 bantamweight fight, a great fight, a good matchup, strong matchup on paper, back and forth. That's what I want to see to open the card. Two guys that come to bang, and JDM versus Gilbert Burns in the second fight on a freaking pay-per-view. Top 5. Who's going to get that? Who's going to win this fight and move into the title eliminator bout? We're looking at Jack Della Maddalena versus Shavkat now. Gilbert Burns and Jack Della Maddalena, the experienced veteran who's still got skill, and Jack Della Maddalena, the up-and-comer. What more intriguing matchup do you need for a pay-per-view? That's a good, solid pay-per-view lineup. Michael Page versus Kevin Holland. Debuting Michael Page against Kevin Holland, two strikers. We knew Michael Page was going to come to strike. Venom came and he showed up and he beat the crap out of Kevin Holland. That is what you want to see. An exciting matchup. Was it the higher ranked of all the other two pay-per-view fights? No, but we knew it was going to be exciting because of the matchup. Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. An example of a pay-per-view that doesn't need to have 2 or 3 title fights to be stacked. Dustin Poirier, the perennial contender, versus Benoit, the up-and-comer. Turned away Benoit in an exciting performance. A great back-and-forth fight. We knew that was going to be a banger. So you need those guaranteed bangers on your pay-per-view. Whether it's Gilbert Burns, Jack Della Maddalena, or Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. A highlight kind of guy versus Dustin Poirier, a legit star. And then finally, the title fight. Sean O'Malley, Marlon Vera. What more can you say? Sean O'Malley's a pretty big star in the UFC. He's got great ability, great, fantastic, entertaining fights, always. And Marlon Vera always comes for the fight. Did he get his ass whooped? Absolutely. But Sean O'Malley's very entertaining. He doesn't have the widespread fan appeal, necessarily, in my opinion. Do the masses of MMA fans like him? Not really. He's got a weird personality, but his fight style is so entertaining, and he's such a good striker. That's what I want to see for a pay-per-view, stacked from top to bottom. Ranked guys, and the debuting guy who's legit, who's been in Bellator, who's always been a contender in Bellator. Ranked guys, ranked girls, ranked guys, ranked dudes. Breaking into the rankings here with Michel Pereira and Mikel Oleksiejczuk. Rebellis Despain's debuting fighter. Asum Almabayev, a good prospect. Joanne Wood, retirement fight. All of these fights had meaning to them. That's what a pay-per-view should be. Let's look at a good away fight night now. A fight night where they go somewhere. Let me see if I can find a good one that's been recent. I can't seem to find one right now, but here we go. Okay. Whitaker versus Aliskerov. Back in June. Yes, did they roll out the red carpet for Saudi Arabia? Was there kind of a bias to the card in terms of getting big matchups on the card? Absolutely. This is not what a fight night has to be, but I think you could have fight nights like this if you do Apexes the way they should be, which I'll get into in just a minute. Apexes should be the tryouts, should be the AAA baseball, the AA baseball, the single A baseball lead up to a fight night where you go to a city across America or Europe or wherever, and then pay-per-views should be all cream of the crop type of guys. Exciting prelims and high-ranking fighters on the main card. Always. Here we go. Robert Whitaker main event. Ikram Aliskerov. Late notice. That's okay. Robert Whitaker. Top 3 middleweight fighter. Pavlovich Volkov. That's a top 5 fight. Gastelum Daniel Rodriguez. Outside the rankings. Gastelum still has a name. That's why that was there. Shara Magomedov. Big name in that region. Johnny Walker Ozdemir. Top 10 matchup. Seeing who might be stepping into a title eliminator match after the win of that. Hak Paras Jared Gordon. A solid outside the rankings matchup. Naimov, Felipe Lima, similar kind of fight. Fakhretdinov, Dalby, guys that come to scrap and are known to come to scrap. Kung Ho Kang and Muin Gafarov, same kind of thing. You know, they always like their guys that with their surnames that end in OV. That's why that was there. Ribeiro versus Godzilayev, same kind of thing. Debuting guy. This is what a fight night should be. Entertaining fighters up and down the card. Local fighters up and down the card. Solid matchups in the prelims on the board. And big fights on the main card. That's a fight night. There have been some embarrassing fight cards recently. Let's look at Verna Jandiroba versus Amanda Lemos. A decent, interesting main event amongst the women's fights. I don't like it when there's a women's main event because they just can't seem to finish each other unless it's some kind of crazy submission. But nonetheless, nothing against the women's fights. They're not always entertaining though. 9 times out of 10, they're not entertaining. This was one of those interesting matchups. Heavy striker versus grappler. I'll give it to them. Whatever, that can be a main event. I'm okay with what this card looks like. If they stack one pay-per-view per month and they stack at least one fight night that is on the road, if they stack it with good, solid fighters, local fighters, fighters we know that come to bang, and some ranked fighters mixed in there. But pay-per-views from top to bottom need to be solid across the board. Do they all have to be fantastic, exciting matchups? Not per se. But you should always put your fighters that are exciting in there where there's a crowd. And the Apex is for those who come off the Contender Series, who come off of the Ultimate Fighter, who are debuting fighters, who don't have big names yet. We need to get them rolling with highlight reels. And what's the perfect place to do that? A small cage at the Apex. And if you can graduate and get, I don't know, let's say 2 or 3 wins at the Apex, does that not mean that you can move on to then a fight night? And if you have 1 or 2 good performances on a fight night prelim on the road in, I don't know, St. Louis, Denver, Dallas, wherever, then you can graduate on to a pay-per-view? This is what I'm talking about. Moving. Sorry about that. I'm getting into my Twitter for absolutely no reason. But what we need to see is legit pay-per-view matchups. And the point is, it's perfectly okay to have terrible Apex cards if they come out and acknowledge that they have a baseball farming system set up from Contender Series first, Ultimate Fighter first, debuting fighters first. Then you graduate to the next level, which is the Apex, a full UFC card. It doesn't have to be 12, 15 fights, but it could be 10 or 8, because then you could space them out and have more cards throughout the year. And once you put on some entertaining performances at the Apex, you move on to the next class. But if you keep stinking it up at the Apex, you're either stuck at the Apex as a boring winner, and then you get cut, or you keep staying at the Apex. Guys like Gamrot and RDA, that would be a great Apex headliner. I don't need to see that in the crowd necessarily. I think every Apex card should have one solid main event, and that's it. Maybe a decent co-main event, but one solid ranked main event, and the rest can be pretty crap, if I gotta be honest with you. But it should be acknowledged by the UFC that this is their farming system. This is where you make yourself exciting. This is where you build your highlight reel, and then you move to the fight nights where you can have a crowd and people can be like, "Ooh, man, look at that highlight. That was fantastic." And then, once you do that, once you cement yourself through those fight nights, have a couple more exciting performances, then you move on to the pay-per-view. You have to legitimize yourself. Make the sport interesting. Make these cards interesting. Make these cards undeniable. Because right now, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya, UFC 305 in Australia, is not an undeniable pay-per-view. Is it the worst pay-per-view you've ever seen? Absolutely not. That's a good matchup. I'm excited to see that fight. I think it's going to be interesting. I hope Israel gets his ass beat. Kai Kara France, Steve Erceg, solid flyweight fight. 2 Australians, though. I'm surprised they're fighting. They could have had them both on the card. Dan Hooker, Mateus Gamrot, solid fight. Tai Tuivasa, Jairzinho Rogenstrike, that'll probably be a fun one. Guys that both want to swing on each other. And Li Jingliang versus Carlos Prates, a solid up-and-comer who has proven his legitimacy in entertaining fights. But when I drop down to the prelims, this looks like a UFC fight night kind of prelims. Are they doing their best with what they can with the Australian fighters? Yes. But does every fighter have to be Australian for the pay-per-views? I have to disagree. Do some fight nights in Australia and have Casey O'Neill and Jack Jenkins and Josh Kulabau and Junior Tafa on there. Tom Nolan coming out of Australia, same thing. These early prelims for a pay-per-view? Are you kidding me? This is not what I want to see. These are fights that most fans would want to skip. If you're not a UFC diehard, you're not watching these fights. And that's not how pay-per-views should be. You want to promote pay-per-views and stack them to the gills so that with every last fight, you keep getting more and more excited so that the fan goes, I'm going to drop my $80, because $80 is a lot of money. Make them want to spend the $80. Don't make them want to pirate the card. Stream the card somewhere illegally. Because, in all honesty, this is one of those cards where I can see leading into it, the Jack Jenkins fight might be the first and only entertaining fight on the prelims. And you got 3 stinkers to go through, and so any casual fan will go, I think I know that Israel Adesanya guy, but man, I don't know who Steve Erceg is, I don't know who Gamrot is. I've heard of Tai Tuivasa, and you don't know Li Jingliang and Carlos Prates. You want to make them buy these cards, man. These guys are all solid fighters. Is it the best pay-per-view ever? No. But you should make them want to buy this. And the UFC is not doing that right now. So if they would just come out, acknowledge that the Apex cards are meant to be their farming system, their career building, highlight building, that's okay. Then you graduate to the fight nights, you get the crowd pumped up, you get the fans' approval in person, get the hype of the crowd around you, then you move up to the pay-per-view, which is next level. People are paying hard-earned money for that. It's expensive to go to pay-per-views. Make these fighters earn it. Because right now they're throwing cards together that stink. That have hardcore fans complaining. If you acknowledge it and have fight nights every week, where you have 2 on-the-road fight nights every month and 1 Apex card for your building up of talent, and then a pay-per-view to top off the month to end it on a good, strong note, That's fine if you acknowledge it and if come out. You don't have to disparage the Apex cards. You just say, this is at the Apex. This is our career building, highlight building event. That's okay. Because then that gets the fans going, ooh, who am I going to see? It's kind of like the Contender Series. All those fights are bangers because they're trying to prove themselves. And if you acknowledge and tell the fighters that the Apex is where you have to prove yourself to get onto the next level, do you not think the fighters are going to fight harder for that? Chael Sonnen always says it. You should be moving up the card through your career. You should be making them put you on the main card. You should be making them put you in the I've lost the word, but the third spot on a main card. They should be earning that spot, and then you earn your co-main event spot, and then you earn your spot on the pay-per-view, and then you earn your co-main event spot on the pay-per-view, and then you earn your title shot. You don't have to be a contender necessarily to be on a pay-per-view. You just have to show up and show out. Pay-per-views should be something to look forward to. Because we're getting so many of them, they're diluted. You have to make these exciting. Dana White, UFC, whoever. Get your shit together and make these cards desirable.